Hi there, this is a second tutorial on using Murally to create or generate design ideas. And it's called an introduction to, it's a brief introduction, to idea modeling using Murally. For those of you who don't know, Murally is an incredibly powerful visual tool for collaboration and putting things on paper together and collaborating in an incredible way. And I'm going to use some of the tools here from the Innographer.com. You can see the two links to those two tool sets right here. Now when we looked at this before, I'll link you back to the video that we've looked at for what was called the super hunch. I gave you a little bit of context. I'm going to very briefly review that context here so that we're at the same starting point when we begin using Murally. So I told you that we're way too often blind squirrels, at least when it comes to coming up with those really big impact ideas. And this came from a quote that I love, which is that even blind squirrels will eventually find acorns. But until they do, there's a lot of wasted effort. And it's human nature to come up with ideas, for most of us anyway, much like a blind squirrel does. We do this in for ourselves, in our companies, and we tend to waste a lot of effort. Here's what I mean. I showed you this before in the first video as well, that it takes some 3,000 raw ideas for one of what the researchers deem to be a success. And we talked about that in terms of initial conditions. So from 3,000 ideas down to one that actually goes out the door and launches and is deemed to be a success. On the far left side we have hunches that we come up with. 3,000 of them it takes for one opportunity that goes out the door. We move from hunches to ideas, ideas to concepts, and concepts to opportunities, given the labeling that I've got on the screen here. And we have some initial condition that we go out the door with. And then we have classic diffusion or adoption of innovation, where we hope that there's some adoption that takes place after that initial launch. What we're looking at here in this idea modeling concept is a way to bring down the number of ideas that we have to go through, the resources we spend there in terms of time and money, and bring up the diffusion. Increase the adoption after launch. That's the promise I'm trying to make here. And that's the process that I want to show you. The second point I want to make before we start is the importance of deliberately designing for really big value. It's not just chance by which you come up with these great ideas. We do it through a process of deliberate design. And here are the criteria I'm going to put on the table for that. We want things to be both highly impactful and highly feasible. We often have this point, which is highly feasible but not yet impactful with our ideas. We often start there. Come up with something we know we can do, but it doesn't have that big impact that we might be looking for, or compared to others, it doesn't have the same level of impact. We also very often start out with these. This is the dreamer, who has a lot of impact. If their idea could fly, oh my goodness, that impact would be huge, but it's not feasible for them. And what we're looking for when we talk about deliberate design of really big ideas is to be in that top corner, right there. In fact, we want to be right tucked up in there, and I'm going to talk to you about a process for doing that here. Just going to show you how to do that in Murally. So that's what we're looking for, and again, that is the promise that I'm making. We want to have go through much fewer than 3,000 ideas and have a really big value version of our adoption. I talked to you about the importance of prototyping and design thinking, how critical they are for this, and I want you to think of what you're doing in Murally as creating prototypes of these ideas, so that over time we can get feedback and refine them through the process of design thinking to get really big value ideas. So it looks something like this. The super hunch, which I've already pointed you to the video that is a tutorial on how to do this, is a prototype of an early stage idea. And you can make just that early stage idea, that hunch, hit the top right corner in terms of impact and feasibility. Where we're going to go with this tutorial is leave the hunch behind and move a little bit further along, assuming you've done your homework on the hunch. You've already iterated to a big value hunch. We're going to talk about really big value ideas, or in the context of Murally, really big ideas. So we're moving along this stage process of ideation from hunches to ideas. And just for context, here are some other typical prototypes you may have heard of. Prototypes of ideas, mind you. The business model canvas lands at around that concept stage. So this hunch and idea stuff comes before that business model canvas. And then you've got the full business plan that comes later. These are all prototypes. So if I put back the super hunch, the big value idea, the canvas, and the full business plan, these are just prototypes of ideas. And they're incredibly important. We're going to use Murally now to look at how some frameworks can be exercised to help us design these big value ideas, to provide leaps in our understanding about those ideas. This is a very, very simple framework. You can pin it on your wall. It comes with a critique form. So you sketch your ideas and you critique your ideas. And we're going to use a version of this in Murally. So let's do it. Okay, I'm looking at Murally. You should be familiar with it by now. I've also left on the mural Super Hunch sketchpad, which you'll recognize from the last tutorial video we did. It's not related to the really big idea directly, but I wanted to contrast it for you. To do that, I'm going to open up Spaces, and you can go down into Spaces, and you'll see there are two spaces here that we're going to use today. One is the really big idea sketchpad, and one is the really big idea critique pad. I'm just going to pull out the sketchpad first and drop it over here. Move things around a bit so we can do some comparisons. And my point in doing this is just to show you the difference between the sketchpad, the hunch sketchpad, and the idea sketchpad. So the hunch one is on the right. It's fairly simple. It has simpler language, so who are you offering it to? Whereas here we start using the language customer. Value proposition in the idea, whereas why did the person you're offering it to care? Just more colloquial, everyday language over here, getting a little bit more detail. You can also see there are more details here. I mean, rather than just who are you offering it to on a single, sticky pad, a sticky note, here you're asked who's the beneficiary or the user, and how does that user use your offering? Who's the economic buyer or decision maker, and how many of those people are there, and so on and so on. So you've got more depth over here. So we don't need the Super Hunch sketchpad anymore. Actually, before I close it though, we'll show on this simple hunch sketchpad that we had, you answered these questions and you did the evaluation right on the same sheet. Very basic, very simple, easy to get at, easy to iterate quickly. Well, we get a little more in depth here. So this critique that happened over here now happens, and I'm going to make a little room for what I'm about to do. It now happens if we open up the spaces over here on the critique pad. So we're a little more detailed, and this one tends to open a little bit bigger than the other one. So I'll scroll it down. I'll even zoom out here and resize it. As you can see, it's really easy to do all this kind of stuff in Murally. It's an incredibly useful, straightforward sort of platform. Now, I've got my sheets open that I need. I'm going to delete that one. I don't need this hunch sketchpad, and I don't want to confuse things anymore. But as you can see here, this critique pad that I've opened is a more in-depth version of the critique, of this charting and of the feedback that we get. So let me give you a quick tour. I've spoken to it a little bit, but just to zoom in a bit first. The really big idea sketchpad has a name, a place for the name of your idea. The same kind of questions, same 5 driving questions. Who are we are more in detail here. Who are the people? What are you offering? Who are you offering it to, or who's the customer? Why would that customer care about the offering? And do you have any core competency, perhaps technology, a science, a special person on your staff, a licensed technology, a patent, something that's core to you? So those are the main elements, and as you can see, you can drill down into more and more detail depending where you go. I'll just show you one corner of this just to get it done and shown. I've spoken to it briefly, but you've got more detail in the questions that you're answering. You're going deeper in your sketch. So I'll zoom out a little bit just to now compare the critique pad to what we saw before. You've still got that chart with impact and feasibility on it. It's here, but you've got an area for getting feedback. This is a great place to use Murally to capture post-it notes, to capture comments, to capture videos, to capture all sorts of things related to the feedback you're receiving on the idea in that sketchpad just above. You've also got a zone here, a region of it, for getting a critical, constructive critique of your idea. And critique's a positive thing, by the way. We often see it as negative, but getting a critique is a positive thing. And here's where we'll do that. So that's a quick tour of what we've now got when we're looking at these really big ideas. So the really big idea sketchpad and the really big idea critique pad. And that's where we start. And then you go and you start by filling it in, just as we did with the hunch. Go and fill in, answer these questions, and elaborate in more detail. Sometimes you might just start with this sketch pad, and sometimes you might be coming at this after having iterated a few times on the hunch. Then once you've got that filled out, you go and you start getting feedback. And you might have one critique pad per person that you get feedback from. Or you might use this to capture your notes on all the feedback that you're getting, you and your colleagues, because down here you can invite people to collaborate with you. So you can get them in here with you and they can comment, or you may take their feedback and put it in here together and just use this to capture it. So I may have more than one critique pad, for example. Now, I'm not going to make you watch me do this. Over in the bottom right, you can see my little navigation zone. I've filled some of this in already. I'll zoom in and just give you a flavor for it. And I'm not going to make you read it all. You can do that on your own time if you're interested, just by pausing the screen here, or pausing the video here. Here are some examples of the kinds of things that you fill in. And usually you start with the white ones and go to the grayed ones after, but it's up to you what order you go in, and so on. Now once I've filled this out, once my team is happy with what we're looking at, I think I've got a good idea. You want to go then and get the critique pad out. And I've done, again, to sort of save time, started to fill that out here. And you can see, I'll zoom in on this portion here because it's wonderful in Murally to see this stuff. I've got a notepad where I've got post-it notes from different people, and you can choose to color code them, and all of that comes in here. You've got a beautiful range of things that you can do there. Whatever works for your team. You can get comments, and these comments can come through this mechanism here. You can do all sorts of things in here. I've embedded a video of somebody speaking, and just to share the richness of the kind of media content you can put in here. And this video, by the way, would be put in here with web content, and you've got then the ability to drag, drop, copy, paste, all sorts of things, and it's just wonderful. So then once you've got that, you might want to say to somebody who gave you feedback, would you mind giving me a critical, constructive critique, a critique of what we've done here. Assess for me the impact and the feasibility. So the impact are these variables and the feasibility are these. And you say to them, could you tell me what you believe our venture's choice of customer, how well it would lead to significant value creation? It would give it a score out of 10. And I've drawn these already. You can go and capture these already for yourself here and change the colors, but I didn't want you to watch me do that. But they can use whatever colors they want. Let's say they give me an 8 out of 10 for the customer or the beneficiary. Yeah, I think the customer you've chosen and the size of that market, the growth of that market, or whatever it might be, gives you about an 8 out of 10. And then they say, yeah, on value proposition, let's say they tell you about 8 out of 10 again. No problems. Now over here on the feasibility side, I've got, let's say they give me that they believe the offering and the core competency would lead to significant value creation. Yes, absolutely. What you've put together it blows it out of the water. Good job, 10 out of 10. But let's say they say, you know what, you don't yet have the right people on the team. You need to go out and outsource some things, outsource some people to do your web development, whatever it might be, whatever the feedback is, they give you a 5 out of 10. And so you've got this feedback. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, just so that on the video you can read what's here. Now you can then chart these values into a position on this chart. I'm going to scroll up just to make the point, up on this chart right here. I'm going to show you how to do that now. It's quite interesting, quite simple. Meant to be a back of the envelope, oops, I've just moved some stuff I didn't want to move. Back of the envelope type calculation that's very straightforward, and it's shown right here. So do have a read of that if you'd like. But I thought I'd just give you a quick demo, literally like a back of the envelope. Now, over here I've got a little sketch tool. This is nothing you need. It's a separate tool. I just use it so I can sketch on the screen and show you. But the way it's done is that your impact, and again, you don't need a special tool on your computer. You can just use a piece of paper for this. And quickly, you'll get good at doing this in your head. I'm just being very explicit in how I show it. Impact is equal to C times VP. So the score you get on customer multiplied by the score you get on value proposition. Very crude, and these are the scores. So somebody's giving you this feedback. Could be a judge, it could be someone who's in a position of expertise, it could be just somebody who you get feedback from, and you want to quantify things a bit more. This is crude, by the way, but it gives you a tool, it gives you a process. So C times VP, in this case, is equal to 0.8 if you put it in terms of a probability, times 0.8. Right? I've got 8 times 8, and probabilities is 0.8 times 0.8. And we do that to get 0.64. And that's it. You do the same thing for feasibility. I'll do it just to be very explicit. But I would write down on my little piece of paper that feasibility is equal to, I haven't got a lot of space here, so instead of squishing it, I'll go OCC, which is the strength of the score on offering and core competency times the score on the people on the team. And if I do the math on that really quickly here, I get 1.0 times 0.5. And if I do that, obviously, I get 0.5. So now I've got two numbers that, if I come back to Murally and move my way up, I'm just going to move things around so I can do that, I can then chart myself on here. Now, impact, I got 64% of the way up the impact chart, and feasibility, I got 50% of the way up the feasibility chart. I'll go back down here just to save time. I grabbed myself a little shape beforehand so I could put them on here. Now feasibility, I'm only halfway up this chart, 50%, so I'm right there. Impact, I was 60, so this is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 64%, roughly there. So I'll go up here, and I'll drop that right, oops, I'm a little low, right around there. And that's how I know that I'm at about that point, just based on that feedback. Don't believe it if you don't believe it. Get more feedback from others, take it with a grain of salt, but it's roughly speaking mapping the feedback that you got in that critique from whoever it was from to this chart. And that can be pretty powerful. And of course then you can go out and do it again. I'm just copying this. Let's say you do it and you redo the math and someone else tells you here. And then you do it again and someone else tells you here. Well, you're getting a bit of a picture of the fact that you're in this zone here. And what can I do to move it up here? And that's how it works. So I would get that feedback. I'm going to zoom out here just to I'll also get rid of my little sketch pad in the background. I don't need that anymore. It's not needed. And then I can go back to my variables and say, okay, well, how can I then improve? And if, let's say I wanted to improve the feasibility, I would go over here and say, okay, feasibility comes from the strength of this score and the strength of this score. Well, okay, I want to improve the feasibility. I'm going to need to look at the people on the team. How can I improve? Now, what comments did I get about that? Okay, right, now let's go back up here and look at who the people on the team are. How can I tighten that up and make it better? Or if I do want to improve impact, I'll go down here again and look at impact comes from the score I get on customer times the score on value proposition. How could I improve those two variables, customer and value proposition? And you keep going around in a cycle from this to this. And that basically is what it looks like, and pretty quickly you've got a great looking sketch prototype of your idea. And before long, your idea, I will zoom in just to end this part, your idea is going to move more and more and more in this direction. And that's exactly what we want. You've got a deep, rich record, lots of different kinds of media of the feedback you got, of the ideas that you had. And up here, you're left with a beautiful prototype of your idea. And in closing, I'm just going to reiterate the point that you need to iterate. You need to iterate and assess and come up with prototypes of your idea with wee bets and quick tests. In other words, get it out there. Get that idea out there. Share it with people. Get their feedback. Keep going in that cycle that looks something like this. Over here in the top left, with the number 1 there, you seed it with rough ideas or hunches. Then you go through this cycle, and then I'll just use the cursor here to show you. You sketch the idea using the really big idea sketch pad. You seek feedback on the critique pad. You keep going until you hit the top right corner and your idea gets to be up here. And then when it does, you've got one of those big impact ideas you're looking for, and you can come out of the cycle and implement those really big value ideas. And I've shown you this before, but I just wanted to leave you with the idea, the cartoon version of what happens. Those are often initial positions that you'll take. You'll be highly feasible and not impactful, or highly impactful and not yet feasible. A portfolio of ideas might look something like this, or a portfolio of feedback. And as you iterate, it'll do this and do this, until you're left with a great little portfolio, or a great set of feedback that lands in that top right, high impact area, high feasibility area. And that's that. I'll leave you with the page where you can find more about this. It's at theinnographer.com/toolkit/idea-modeling. You can find it all there. This is a product of the Innographer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you using it, and thank you very much.